Hello, everyone. We are live today on Thursday, October 16th, and this is episode 158. You can see on the bottom of the screen there, you can find related links for the episode at augforums.com/episode 158. And today's episode is on Acumatica Upgrades, which, I spelled it wrong. Oh, hold on. This is embarrassing. Let me fix that. I missed the R in upgrades.
Oh, upgrades.
There we go. Upgrades, especially with the modern UI. And got Garrett Rochell here. Garrett, thanks for coming on, talking about upgrades today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. Definitely watched a lot of your stuff and, honored to be here and happy to be a part of it.
So I think this was in New Jersey that I saw you, if I remember correctly. You had come up from Florida to attend the user group there. Might have been over a month ago at this point. And we talked about this idea of upgrades. And so, before we get into upgrades, maybe just give us the brief origin story of yourself here, where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you got into the world of mid-market ERP. And then you can tell us what you're doing now.
Perfect. Yeah. So I was the Florida guy at the New Jersey user group. So that I stuck out a little bit there, a little bit of a sore thumb, but yeah. So I was born and raised in Central Florida, kind of just west of Orlando, here for pretty much all of my growing up life. So up through to around 2022 or so. I went to school, University of South Florida, for finance. So I was, pretty big into finance and accounting to start off. I started my career working with Ford Motor Credit, and then I worked with an accounting firm up in Nebraska doing government audit. I became, I guess, pretty bored and tired of finance and accounting pretty quickly. So I made a very abrupt shift to a small proprietary ERP called Reynolds and Reynolds, where they do, it was Era Ignite at the time, and they did ERP for car dealerships specifically. So all different makes and models. So kind of my introduction to ERP was on a much smaller scale, much smaller projects, to where I kind of fly out on a Monday morning, fly back on a Friday night, and the project was done. It was kind of a rinse, wash, and repeat type of implementation, pretty straightforward. The largest project might take a month, whereas obviously that kind of be a dream, a pipe dream here in our mid-market ERP world. But that's where I started, and it got me interested in, I was focused at that time on the accounting, payroll, kind of the back end of the car dealerships, and it got me interested in the technology and ERP world. So then I happened to find out that there was a Acumatica VAR in Central Florida, based out of Ocoee, which is actually the next town over from where I grew up, which is Winter Garden, all kind of on the outskirts of Orlando. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Let's have a conversation. So I reached out to them. Mike Agello was the CEO at the time. We had some good conversations, and I decided to, transition to Acumatica. They were, they gave me a great opportunity, and I'm really appreciative to them, because that's where I started Acumatica. That was 2018 or 2019 when I made the transition to Acumatica. So since then, I've been working in the VAR ecosystem. I've worked with a couple of different VARs. I've worked in distribution, done a lot in construction, have worked some with manufacturing and e-commerce, and had a stint at a nonprofit VAR as well. So I've kind of worked in the different areas. The first few years of my career, it was kind of all implementation. And then I made kind of a pretty natural shift, just due to interest and skill set and things like that, into leading the support and development functions for the VARs that I was working with. So for the past 3 to 4 years, I've been more heavily involved on that side. So that naturally ties in very closely to upgrades, and that's where I started to kind of get the feel for some of the things that were working very well with upgrades, some of the things that were not working so well, and some of kind of just the natural juggling and pain points of an Acumatica upgrade. So that kind of brings us to present day. Currently, I'm working with Sprintera, they're an Acumatica ISV as well as a service provider. So one of the big things that we have built out is an upgrade program. kind of based off of some of the experience and best practices that we've seen over the years. I'm not
I'll
catching.
put Sprintera up on the screen, sprintera.com. Also, I'll put it in the related links. So tell me more about Sprintera. So you said ISV and service provider. That means not a VAR, not selling Acumatica. Is that correct?
Correct. So not selling Acumatica. So we're an ISV with a couple of products. We have a cash basis reporting solution as well as a property management solution. And then on the services side, we offer, so we have upgrade services. I'd say kind of our bread and butter through the years has been development. That's where we started. So back in around 2015 or so, development is kind of where we transitioned into the Acumatica space because of some of the customizations we were doing to our own internal Acumatica environment. And then we've expanded data migration. We offer implementation and that sort of thing. And one thing that's fairly unique about Sprintera is we don't really market at all to end customers. It's all to VARs. So we work directly with VARs. Of course, we're working on their clients' environments and their clients' projects and that sort of thing. But we tend to maintain relationships with the VARs directly. So that's something that's a little unique here at Sprintera, and that's where we source the vast majority of our work is directly through VARs.
Okay, cool. So yeah, the developer side, like knowing how to do stuff in the Acumatica framework in a good, for lack of a better word, a good way, without breaking stuff, and also I would think a big part of that, in my opinion, is making whatever customizations you make as resilient to upgrades as possible. That's an art, not just a science. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's a big portion of both in that. Part of the science would be, I mean, using standard coding best practices to begin with, which, believe it or not, is actually not as common as you may think. And I've kind of seen both from the VAR perspective and from our perspective, where maybe we come into a client's environment after they have 5 different customizations built by 5 different people. There's such a huge variety in the quality of the code that you see. And that's one of the things about our upgrade program, and we'll probably talk more about it later. But one of the things that we do is any customization that we're upgrading, and I think this is probably best practice across the board, is we run it against the same validation process that Acumatica uses when they're vetting an ISV that's going to be coming into the Acumatica marketplace or something like that. So there's something like 22-ish core coding principles that Acumatica validates. We run the same validation as just a small part of our process to make sure proper naming conventions are being used, kind of top to bottom, just making sure it's healthy code, because that's step number one to being code that's going to be easy to maintain, is just writing it in the best, based on best practices in a healthy way.
So that's part of, you said, the upgrade program. Is that what you call the upgrade program?
Yeah. So the upgrade program is kind of a full service program, start to finish, from sandbox creation and testing all the way through to executing in production and doing kind of some follow-ups and sanity checks. One part of this process, in kind of leading up to and during the sandbox testing, is we have an automated customization assessment tool, which it does a few different things, but one of them is it performs all of that technical validation. It also runs a kind of a variance analysis to assess the code and see where in the future version will manual effort be required, what changes are going to need to be made in order to prep it. Let's say moving to 25R1, maybe from 24R1, something along those lines. It assesses the complexity of the code, and this is more so for our benefit to understand maybe level of effort in order to kind of move it forward to that next version. So it's doing some of these things very quickly behind the scenes. End result is it generates a comprehensive report that outlines, what's included in this package, how many screens is it touching, how many scripts is it running, is it touching any third-party softwares, all of the ins and outs of the package to give us an overall complexity score. And then it's also giving us a result on the technical validation that it ran. Is it in compliance with all the 22 core tenets? And then it's also giving us a report on what's going to need to happen in order to bring it forward to that new version appropriately.
Interesting. I definitely want to dive into that more. Before I do, though, I'm going to take a step back here on upgrades. I want to get your take on two screenshots. These are actually from slides that I did years ago, over 5 years ago, just to talk about the Acumatica framework in general and how it works. And then let's talk about how this impacts upgrades. I want to get your take on these. So my background personally prior to 2013 was working with a Sage ERP product called Sage 500, formerly Mass 500. Most of their business logic was in SQL stored procedures. And so I spent about 5 years at a company in-house doing nothing but modifying SQL code and stored procedures. Really enjoyed it. I liked it, but upgrades were always a real pain in the neck. And here's why. So if I put this on the screen, this is my illustration for what it was like in Sage 500 / Mash 500. The code that I would write, so think of like, if you look at that picture on the top, that's a bunch of code. And then I've drawn a red box around 4 lines of code that would be something that I inserted into the standard code. And so the problem is when things got upgraded, that whole thing would just get wiped out with whatever the new code was in the new version. And then what I would have to do is go back in and find the spot to insert those 4 lines. Thankfully, with Sage 500, it didn't change much when I was working with it. It was kind of on life support. So there wasn't a lot of changes. But if it did change, you'd have to find the new spot to insert the code. And so the way the coding worked was like a bowl of soup there. Your code was just mixed in with all of the code from the ERP publisher. And so it was just a real painful process to do upgrades. In theory, with Acumatica, it works much different. Actually, not in theory. I mean, this is how it works. Your custom code is separated from the core code in Acumatica using customization projects. So everything that you deploy into Acumatica as your customization is done through the customization project screen. And you can have a bunch of different ones. We could talk about that, like pros and cons of having a ton of them versus a few of them. But bottom line, you can have, let's say, 4 customization projects in this screenshot, but it's not mingled in with the Acumatica code. So in theory, all you do is update the Acumatica core code and everything works. And I have seen those situations where you just upgrade Acumatica and everything's good. No problems at all. And it worked because of that simple concept of your code is not intermingled like it is in more legacy ERP players. What are your thoughts on those 2 screenshots? Is that a nice simplistic overview of how it works?
Yeah, I think in general, and I've seen the same where, if you have a simple customization package, I think a lot of times the process that VARs take to test that package in the new version has nothing to do with actually going in the code and looking at it. It's simply, does it publish and does it validate? And in many cases for the simpler customization projects, based on the way that Acumatica has it set up, it does publish, it does validate, and it does work because it's, like you said, you don't have a tangled web of your code versus Acumatica's code, and then you have to untangle it for an upgrade, kind of tie it back together and make it happen. So I think, definitely very different than your early days, like you said, with Mass. And I think it works well. Now, it's definitely not foolproof, and customizations that start to have a bit of complexity to them, there tends to be more of a process in order to move those over to the new version. But this is definitely a game changer because you no longer have to, you don't have to get intimately involved with every single customization of all sizes in order to be able to upgrade. It's just going to be those that have that added layer of complexity.
Oh, I lost you for a second. I was trying to pull up the phrase that I had. I can't remember now on the episode. Give me a second.
Yep.
Yeah, so let's talk real world in a second here, but before we do, so with the slide that's on the screen, looks nice and simple, right? Always current. That was the phrase I was looking for.
Okay.
So this slide looks nice. It's totally true, especially when you compare it to the code soup slide. But I think it can get overly sold as, hey, if you move to Acumatica, everything, basically upgrades aren't a thing anymore. And I've heard some people pitch it that way. It's like Acumatica, you don't even have to worry about upgrades anymore. They'll come up with new words for it, like updates or something else other than the scary word of upgrade, because people have painful stories associated with the word upgrade. I still prefer to use the word upgrade because I think that's what it is. And anyway, so yeah, I think this simplistic view of things can get overly sold. And I think then you set yourself up for failure, because now clients have really high expectations of upgrades just going super smooth, right? And so in your experience, it sounds like we're already going there, but let's go there now. That's not always the case. And maybe you might not be able to answer this, but I'll hit you with a totally broad question. Would you say that, all right, if we say totally smooth means you upgrade Acumatica and everything just works, no testing, nothing needed. Like you could just have Acumatica could just upgrade their cloud at night one day, you come in the next morning and boom, everything's just working fine. Is that less than 50% or more than 50% of customers' experiences? Your gut feel. We don't need actual data on this.
For me, it's absolutely less than 50%. Just being the reality of what's out there. And yeah, I typically refer to major version upgrades as an upgrade, and then if they're moving between builds, I'll refer to it as an update, because those can be a lot closer to plug and play, with the exception of maybe some build specific coding that you have in there, which is becoming less and less common. So typically the majors, I'll refer to them as upgrades. But yeah, it's fairly rare for someone to have customizations in place in which the upgrade is just you spin it up, you go forward, and you're good to go. There's almost always going to be some level of effort, some small thing, even something as simple as, even if we start to look outside of just customizations in general, maybe a data table, it no longer exists, and maybe you have a couple of GIs that are referencing it. Even some of the native Acumatica GIs sometimes will have issues because they make a change to a DAC, or a field is now obsolete that was maybe used in a join or as part of the GI, and that's not something that's caught in the upgrade. So even some of those non-customization things can rear their head from time to time. Less common, but that stuff happens too. But yeah, in general, I mean, I don't view Acumatica upgrades as plug and play. There's always oversight that's needed. Now, the exception could be if you're someone that's using 100% kind of vanilla Acumatica functionality, you don't have customizations, you don't have any crazy processes or anything like that, you don't have custom reports, then for the most part, you can upgrade and you're not really going to have any big issues. But once you start to have customization in there, you start to have people that are building custom GIs, you have automations, you have custom reports, maybe with sub reports, all of those types of things, they tend to require some level of oversight and effort in the sandbox testing process to make sure that they're ready to go. So I guess long answer to a short question, but I definitely have it under 50%, where it's just a kind of a flip of a switch type of a deal.
And I'm totally with you. I don't have data to back it up, but that's my gut feel as well. It's less than 50%. Still, in my opinion, not a scary thing. Not as scary as upgrading legacy ERP, but I just like to set that expectation up front with people that, hey, this is not like this whole always current idea in the real world. it's not as smooth as maybe it's getting pitched to you, right? So, and as long as you have that expectation, I think people are okay with it.
Yep.
At least I'm okay with it. I want to know that going into it, right?
Yep.
You said major and minor. I wanted to pull something up here. Get my screen shared. And let's go back here. So you said major and minor. Where's my screen? There we go. So this is builds.acumatica.com, where all the builds are sitting out there. You mean major is like a 25R1, a 25R2, a 24R1, a 24R2, the 2 major releases
Right.
a year. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
And then when you say minor, like if I go into one of these, here's the individual, what you called updates. I also like using that word for these. These are the minor updates within a major version of the 2 per year.
Yep.
And one thing I've noticed, so this little tangent here, but I still don't understand the new thing that they're doing with service packs. So like if I look at 24R1, there's a bunch of update builds that happen in 24R1. If I look at 24R2, same thing. There's a bunch of update builds. If I look at 25R1, there's only a couple. And that's been out for a while. So I know they moved to something with service packs that I still don't understand. Do you know more about that, how that's working?
No, I still don't have a great understanding of that myself. That's something that I'm very curious to see how it impacts the upgrade process. It sounds like at a glance, and this is just from reading a few articles and being a part of some fringe conversations, it sounds like maybe it's making the upgrade process a little more bite-sized, and it's less of a, every major upgrade is kind of a big process. Maybe it's more marginal steps to get from point A to A1, A2, A3 before you get to B. But I haven't seen it in practice yet, and I'm not sure exactly what the impact's going to be. But that's just my general impression, is that it's going to make the upgrades a little more bite-sized as opposed to 1 or 2 really big ones each year.
Yeah, I'm still feeling it out as well. I've talked to a few people about it. One other thing I picked up is that so this is my impression of it. We're both kind of learning, but my impression is that now less effort is going into releasing builds every 2 to 4 weeks, and more effort is going to providing people with hot fixes. That way they don't have to do like full-blown updates that could break other things. They would just get a hot fix that fixes their one issue until they go to the next major release. That's sort of my take on it. So instead of like everyone has to get a new update, which is like a mini upgrade, to pick up a fix, they could just deploy a hot fix into your environment, which then takes developer resources away from releasing minor updates every 2 to 4 weeks. And that's why you're getting less. That's part of my impression on it. So
yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting, because it's kind of the reverse of what you would typically expect from a company that's growing. And typically you're trying to, like, you want more repeatable processes. You're going to have less that's catered to each specific customer. So I am curious to see how that pans out and what the level of effort is going to be from Acumatica to do kind of what it sounds like what you're saying is more so like hot fixes on demand for smaller subsets of customers, or even for specific customers, as opposed to kind of generalizing the larger problems that they're seeing across the ecosystem and then providing the minor builds incrementally to fix those. So I'm curious to see how they're rolling that out and how it works in practice. From looking at 25R1, like you said, it definitely looks like less minor versions in between the major versions. But I'm curious how much effort they're putting into those hot fixes, like you mentioned, and if it's going to be just from Acumatic's perspective, is it a time saver for them, or is it something that they're going to have to sink more resources into? I'm not sure.
Yeah, me neither. Both feeling it out. I totally agree with your point about, you would think it'd be the opposite. You would think you would add more hot fixes when Acumatica is smaller and you'd shift to the building. But obviously there's a reason why they did it, and they know more about what they deal with in the real world than we do. So I don't know. It'd be very interesting. And then they could always swing the pendulum back the other way if it doesn't go well. But I do think it's interesting. We actually have at least 2 people live. Here, I'll flash some comments on the screen. This is fun. So I had spelled upgrades wrong in the title, but I guess we got a comment that upgates was okay. Then Haley's on. Let's see. I think if someone has a VAR who works to make it seamless and performs more testing than normal, clients don't notice the upgrade process. But if a site is just upgraded without any oversight, more issues occur. Vanilla sites that can just upgrade without oversight are rare. Totally agree with all of that.
I think.
Oh,
I was just going to say on that last one, I think that's a really good point, because if you have clients talk, right? Like if they're in the same industry and they're using Acumatica, that's what user groups are for. That's what, a lot of the communities in Acumatica are for. And you have a client who has a VAR who has a really strong upgrade process, and they're like, yeah, our upgrades are easy. I was sold that upgrades are easy, and it truly is in Acumatica. And then you have the other client who's like, maybe their VAR's upgrade process is not as defined or as in depth. And they're like, no, upgrades have been terrible for us. Maybe we're just unlucky. And it's like, in this scenario, truly the way that upgrades are dealt with, whether it's via the VAR or whether it's using a service provider like Sprintera, the way upgrades are dealt with can make all the difference. The same client with the same customizations of the same level of complexity in scenario A, they may not even feel it. In scenario B, they're dealing with the fallout for a month and a half following the upgrade. So I think that's a really good point from Haley. She's commenting in from iTech, and they're known for having really streamlined, really strong processes and being very customer focused. So it makes sense that from their side, their clients are probably not feeling it as much as maybe a VAR who has less defined processes and it is less involved in the upgrade process. Like the VAR that you're working with or the partner that you're working with, that makes all the difference.
Love it. Ada's got another one on here. Hot fixes equal patches. Okay, didn't know that. So that's another term for hot fixes, and they are pushing patches per issue for only those that may be affected. Yeah, interesting. So that's what I had heard also, Haley, that it is a little more effort on. I guess they're calling it patches, not hot fixes now. That's interesting.
So
yeah, Haley, if you want to chime in there, your thoughts on just the whole idea of Acumatica is growing, and as you're growing, it's interesting. The developer resources are shifting to patches, but I guess you're saying per issue and not per specific customer. So that kind of makes sense. You can scale that, but curious your thoughts just on how you scale that model versus the old process. Yeah, interesting.
So old approach being there's a bug in sales orders. We're going to create version 25.105, which is going to have the fix for that bug. And the approach now sounds like there's a bug we're hearing about in sales orders. We're going to create a patch for it. If a client reports that it's impacting their business, they can access the patch. Otherwise, there's no need to do a full upgrade for everyone when some people are impacted, some people aren't. So maybe it's a similar level of effort. If they're doing it per issue, then it's just building the patch for that issue. Yeah. If the client asks for the patch, then they can get it. Otherwise, there's, if it's not impacting them, it doesn't matter anyways.
Because the builds or the minor updates, whatever you want to call them, that was annoying. That it's like, all right, to get the fix, I have to apply the update, which could break something else.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Haley, if you know, or maybe Garrett, I assume that a patch would be applied with a customization project. I assume.
I don't know that for a fact, but that's what I've heard is that it's going to be a customization project. And yeah, there's the whole Russian relay aspect of a build update shouldn't break anything, and it's probably not going to break anything, and you need the fix, but you are kind of rolling the dice with that because typically you're not spinning up a sandbox for just a minor build update. So you're going out on some level of faith that nothing's going to break, and it typically won't, but there's also kind of that, that 1% chance. So it's nice.
I like that Russian roulette example. And maybe it's not a a 6-cylinder pistol. It's something,
Yeah,
much more cylinders, but there's still a chance, right?
yeah, yeah.
Maybe it's more like the movie Dumb and Dumber, like
Hmm.
so you're saying there's a chance. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember that line. But
Yep.
oh, this is interesting. So I didn't know this part. Oh, so does that mean, Haley, it's not pushed out as a customization project? They somehow know who may be affected and push the patch automatically. Oh, interesting. Um, and it gets applied in the background. Okay, that's new to me. I didn't know that yet.
Yeah, I do
Interesting.
wonder the mechanics on how they're applying that. I know there was, and I forget what screen it was on. Well, maybe it was actually the apply update screen in Acumatica, but there used to be, I don't know if it's still there, but there used to be an option to like push the upgrade through from that screen rather than actually going into Acumatica requesting them to do an upgrade from their side. And I never did that because I heard all kinds of issues with it where it would
Me
like go
too.
part of the way
Yeah,
through and
yeah.
not actually work. I wonder if they're using similar improved functionality to that to kind of do something behind the scenes that's not very invasive. I would be curious to learn that kind of the technical side of what they're doing to just kind of sneak it in the background. And it sounds like the client may or may not even know that it's happened. Which if
Yeah,
they
it's
master
interesting.
that, then let's apply that to the major upgrades too in some form or fashion and smooth out that process as
Yeah, yeah,
well.
you start to go in that direction, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Haley does say no package, okay. And then yeah, I haven't seen this yet. It's because it's pretty new. And it shows up on the homepage as like a little extra
Ah,
number. So at least you do see it on the homepage, so you know truly what code you're running on. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to go
pretty
too
cool.
far down that tangent. I just know it's a new thing, and I've been wanting to learn more about it myself. So this has been great already. Thank you, Haley. This is great info. Yeah, to your point there, I always get in trouble for saying stuff like this, but I say it anyways. I feel like Acumatica is becoming more and more like NetSuite, just the way they think. They even have Zach Nelson, who was the CEO of NetSuite for decades, on their
Hmm.
board of directors now, and that's the kind of thing NetSuite does, right? Just like this, you just update the cloud, automatically.
Yeah,
We'll see how it plays out. I like that they're still keeping the major versions. I don't know a lot about NetSuite. I don't know if they even have that concept or if it's just like a always current or always one version. I don't know what they do, but I do like that at least you have some choice whether you upgrade from 24R1 to 25R2, But it sounds
hmm,
like, yeah, they are moving in that direction of just automatically deploying stuff, which is interesting.
yep,
All right, so back to just upgrades in general. So, we've talked about the theory of upgrades and how they should be seamless. We've talked about, yeah, nothing to do with the software, but the VAR that you're working with and how robust their process is has a lot to do with your experience. Now, I guess let's talk more about some specific. I want to talk about low code and no code a little bit. So,
hmm,
when you deploy, when you talk about low code, no code in Acumatica, you could be talking about a bunch of different things. We could be talking about the no code way that you can create a generic inquiry, just using a screen instead of having to write a SQL statement. That would qualify to me as maybe low code because you might write some formulas on the generic
sure,
inquiry.
sure,
You could also say side panels fall into that category. And side panels, you can add side panels to generic inquiries just in the generic inquiry screen. You might be talking about a business event with low code, no code. And a business event you can create on the business event screen. But for some things, you cross the line into needing to deploy a customization project. So like for a side panel, you can add it to a generic inquiry on the fly, but to add it to a data entry screen, you have to deploy a customization project to do that.
sure,
And
yeah,
so one thing I am still trying to feel out is in this low code, no code world, when do you cross the line into deploying a customization project and when do you not? So that's part of the thing to feel out there. And then once you cross the line into a customization project, even though it's a low code, no code customization, like, you might just check some boxes in there and
yeah,
change some descriptions, real simple stuff. But in my opinion, that's still a customization. What's your take on that?
No, yeah, I mean, I would agree, because kind of behind the scenes, what's happening is a coding exercise. When you check the box, it's writing the appropriate lines of code to, approach the same thing. So to me, anything, if it's in a customization package, then it warrants at least looking at as part of an upgrade. But yeah, something as simple as, let's say we want to make a field required, or we don't want it to be required, or we want it to show up on a header, which in 25R2 is going to be a lot easier to do. But let's say we're prior to that, something as simple as that
Oh
popping.
yeah, we're gonna get to the modern UI impact of this.
Yeah.
Good point. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but like making a field visible, that to me is that's a customization. And even though it's probably just about the smallest scale that you can imagine. And then on the flip side, like you mentioned, business events and, creating a side panel on a GI, those types of things. I think it falls in the low code, no code space as well, but where it warrants attention. So to me, anything that you're customizing to any extent, it should be looked at as part of any upgrade that you're doing, because that's where your risk of having an issue tends to increase exponentially once it's something that's non-standard or out of the box, something that wasn't shipped with Acumatica. Even if you're using kind of standard low code functionality to add a side panel, it's still worth looking at, because those types of things are the things that can sometimes shift through an upgrade. But again, small components like that, you're talking about a very small chance of it breaking. But that's kind of the beauty of some of the stuff that Sprintera has built, is all of those things are tested in an automated manner. It's called system integrity testing is what they've got it termed as. But everything, whether it's a GI, whether it's a report, whether it's an import scenario, when sometimes we can see the field mappings change in import scenarios, those types of things with an upgrade, all of that's checked in an automated manner. So you're essentially having a bot go and test all of these processes, test all of these screens. Is the GI opening? Are we getting an error? What's the error? All those types of things. So it turns what would be, if we're assigning it to the end user, or if we're assigning a consultant to it, I mean, physically touching each of those screens and each of those components, your minimum 4 or 5 hours to do that, to touch everything that needs to be touched. Whereas with automation built in, then all of a sudden it's a 10 minute process with a full report that's generated at the end to kind of highlight those things. So I guess to summarize that, you sometimes see issues in those areas, but it's very difficult to manually cover all of those bases. So what happens is you kind of have occasionally what clients would consider random bugs or gremlins in the system following an upgrade, where it's like, this GI worked yesterday, now it's not working. And it's like, well, it's just a standard GI. It's out of the box. All we did was add a side panel, and maybe now it's not working. All of that kind of can go away by either assigning the manual resources to it, which the value proposition of that is kind of tough for a VAR, because it's like, why am I assigning 4 to 5 hours of work for something that's going to happen 1 out of every 10 upgrades or something like that? Whereas if you have an automated process to just kind of plug and play with it, you no longer have to assign someone to it, other than if it's flagging issues that you can then act on the 5 highlighted issues that are, wherever they may be in the system. So it's always been a tough thing for a VAR to manage, because in some portions of the upgrade are going to go wrong so infrequently in the grand scheme of things, it's difficult to allocate resources to. But if you're managing 100 customers and it's happening 1 out of every 15, all of a sudden that's happening for 7 different customers in each upgrade cycle. So that's been a tough balancing act, I think, for a lot of ours, is figuring out how many resources to assign to each upgrade for the things that may happen, as opposed to the things that you need a level of effort on, like a very complex customization. Sometimes it's difficult to find that balance.
Interesting. I might regret doing this, but I'm gonna try this anyways. I'm gonna put my screen back on here, and I'm gonna see if I can illustrate what a simple low code, no code what I'm still going to use the word customization for, what it would look like. So here I am on the customization project screen. Nothing's published. There's 3 out here, but nothing's published. So if I create a new one, live might regret, let's call it that. And we were talking about like a super light, I'm still using the word customization for this, but let's try doing one. And this is where I might regret it, but let's see. I don't know. Let's do something to the vendor screen. And I haven't even been in this. This is like 25 R2. I might even be on like the first non-official release. Yeah, I might regret this already. I just want to get in and be able to illustrate an example of something you can do. Let's see. Do I expand it? Yeah, I don't know. Oh, here we go. All right, this is what I want to get to. So yeah, let's say I do something and there's going to be a total shift in the modern UI. So I'm trying to think of something that you would not be able to do in the modern UI. You know, if you can add a side panel on the fly in the modern UI? I don't think you can.
I don't believe you can.
So like you can rearrange columns. So you used to have to come in here and like say, all right, I want vendor status in front of vendor ID and drag it like that.
Yep.
I don't think we need that anymore in the modern UI. But side panels, oh yeah, here's where somewhere in here we do side panels. I can't even remember where. It might be down here. I don't remember. But we do something in here. But it's not super crazy. Once you get a feel for it, do you remember where the side panels is? It's been a little bit since I've done that. And it looks a little
off the top of
different
my
to me. Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, somewhere in here you could add like a side panel. Oh, go ahead.
It's like 3 drop-down fields and a couple of boxes that you're selecting. Very.
Oh wait, I know where it is. It's in. It used to be like underneath. Here it is. It was like under here. It might be workflows or actions. I think it might be actions. So you come in here. Oh yeah, this is all new. I haven't been in here at all yet. Modern UI editor. This is cool. Let's check this out. But yeah, you come in here, you'd add a new action, and you could do side panel right here. And so you could give it a name, whatever. But you can see this is not super crazy. I got nice little pop-ups. I'm gonna end up saving it. So let me do something on the vendor screen like this. And I want to look at, I think I could even say like run a report.
Yeah. Like a vendor summary or an aging or something.
I don't want to get too bogged down here, but something I just want to be able to hit save. Test side panel. I'd have a display name, and then in here, can I run report? Yeah, so somewhere we'd have it do something, but at the end of the day, you'd hit save on it, and now you'd have a new action under here. And so that would be now your customization project. And then if you want to publish that, this is a process. And to me, here's the key to why I wanted to bring this up. This is not something you do during the day. This is something you do after hours when everyone is out of the system, because you don't publish a customization project when people are logged in. And to me, that's a huge difference between low code, no code as a customization project and low code, no code as a business event or something you can do during the day, right? Because it's just annoying that you have to now log in when everyone's off the system to deploy this thing and do some little testing to make sure you didn't break stuff, right?
Yeah.
But then there's advantage to doing that, right? That if you just have on the fly code that's running, it's more taxing on a computer. Whereas if you do deploying a customization project, it's actually compiling code, and compiled code runs faster in general, right? So that's always the trade-off. Like, am I just doing something that's on the fly, or am I doing something that's compiled? There's always pros and cons to both approaches.
Right.
So anyways, I wanted to illustrate that. But all right, so going back to your example. So let's say in that thing of adding a side panel, let's stick with that example. If I added the side panel to the vendor screen, you said it's a bot. So tell me more about the Sprintera thing that you have going there. Is it some like headless web browser that's running, or is it actually, is it like a front end thing where it's actually clicking on stuff, or is it more behind the scenes where it's somehow doing it in the framework itself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's there's the where we're at, and then there's this some of the features that we're building. So currently the way that it's built is it's essentially a bunch of scripts that are running. So our team's built out scripts that are going to go into the system, and they're going to perform each of the steps. So it's actually happening on the front end where they're going in, and it's on, let's say on a sales order, for example, you're entering a customer, you're entering a date, you're putting in a couple of detail lines, you're putting amounts, you're doing all of that, you're taking a sales order through, you're processing a shipment, you're invoicing, you're running a payment, you're maybe voiding that payment. So it's kind of going through it's running through all of your standard processes, just in an automated manner via different scripts that they've built. So it's a comprehensive suite of scripts. There's I think like 100 plus scenarios that we've accounted for. In addition to, it's been built to run for generic inquiries. So it's testing, is the inquiry opening? Because the easiest way to you'll see an issue is the generic inquiry doesn't open at all. It populates an error instead saying this field can't be found or something like that. So is it opening on a report? It's saying, is the report opening? And in some cases you'll have the report open, but within the report there's like a couple red error messages for formulas that are broken or data fields. So it's actually going into the report as well to return any errors. So is it opening? Yes, but then there's two errors within the details of the report. It'll return those. So our import scenarios running, our fields showing as obsolete on imports, are the business events firing. So it's doing all of that, and it's running in the sandbox environment, and then returning a report. So that's kind of where it's at now, is just all kinds of pre-written scripts where it's set in stone processes that we're having it run through. What we're working on and what we've been spending a lot of time on is adding an AI component, like an AI agent component to it, where the AI agent is going to learn how the users use the system. So not only are they taking sales order to shipment, but maybe there are nuances in that process. Maybe there's an extra step that they're taking. So it's going to be able to learn how they're doing it, and then it's going to perform their exact nuanced scenarios in the sandbox environment. And so that's the phase two of what we're working on. So right now it's all pre-built. We're telling this automated process exactly what to do. In the longer run, it's going to be something where it's more self-sufficient to be able to understand processes that are being run and then recreate those processes in the sandbox environment. So it's going to have a slightly increased level of accuracy when it comes to identifying errors, because it's going to more perfectly replicate what users are doing, as opposed to running through as many pre-built processes as it can.
Interesting. And I've got to think Acumatica's got to be working on similar type of technology. Do you know? Or maybe they're just too bogged down with other stuff. That's interesting.
So yeah, so we've been in pretty close contact with Acumatica as we've been building this out. To my knowledge, we don't have any. We're not really in competition with them. There's been a lot of encouragement as far as continuing to go down this path. So I think part of it is they may be waiting to see kind of what we can come up with. They're obviously putting all kinds of investment into AI and all of the the machine learning and the order orchestration, all these different things that they've been working on their side. And they're working on support bots and all these kinds of things. But I think there is right now, at least, a separation between what they're doing and what we're working on. Whether or not that comes closer together, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a joint project or how we're going to be assisting. But in the long run, I'm not sure. But for right now, there seems to be a pretty clear separation in what they're doing versus what we're doing.
Interesting. I like that use case for AI because I still think AI has a big use case problem right now, like especially in the ERP world. it does really cool stuff,
Yeah.
generates images and writes summaries of stuff it's ingested, all this cool looking stuff. But when it comes to a practical use case in a business, I think AI, we're all still struggling to find those. Like when
Yeah.
we saw the demo of the AI studio, I thought that one was cool where they summarize all the activities on a case and created the closing
Yeah.
note for the case. Great use case. There's one.
Mhm.
Another use case I've seen is generating descriptions of items, but even that one, I'm a little nervous on that one. I don't know if I want AI controlling my descriptions that show up on my e-commerce site. So it's like one and a
Yeah.
half, maybe.
Mhm.
I'm not seeing like these long lists yet. I haven't been that heavy into it, but I like this one of applying AI to the upgrade process because of that. And I like that, having it learn how you interact with Acumatica. That's a pretty cool idea. But before you even get there, I mean, just
Yeah.
being able to do a script that automates, oh, I think I might have lost you here. Did I lose you? Maybe I lost me. Let's see. Just make sure it's not my internet. Yeah, I think it's your internet, Garrett. Oh, I think you're back. You
Are
back?
you with me? Okay. Yeah. Sorry
Yeah,
about
I
that.
got you now. But before you even get there, everyone's got to be doing something with AI. Great to know you are. Let's talk about today. When you talk about scripts, and I'll push for whatever info you can give me, but I don't want to get you in trouble with unveiling your secret sauce either. So feel free to be like, maybe I shouldn't respond to this. When you talk about scripts, though, so it's a great idea in theory, I think, to come up with a process. Like, I know I want to make sure that in the new Acumatica version, I can go to the sales order screen. I can put in customer XYZ. I can add 3 lines to the order with products A, B, and C, set quantities, different quantities, prices,
Yep.
save it, hit the process shipments button. That makes total sense to me. Like if I have a macro that just does that in a web browser, but practically speaking, like that is tricky to do. And so I'm curious, do you know if you're doing it with like some macro on top of a web browser, or are you using, I think Acumatica has some like testing suite that lets you do it with API calls or something. I don't even know. Do you know the mechanics of how that script actually runs?
Not really. So this is not so much me protecting our information as not being as involved with the development of this. So
Gotcha.
I'm
Yeah, no
not
problem.
sure the
No problem.
mechanics. I do know that. So part of what we're doing to make it easier, because ultimately you're working with all this client data, we're populating all kinds of test data to start out, but then how we're mechanically performing the process, I'm not entirely sure if it's I, I don't think it's the macro on top of the web browser, but I'd be happy to look into that and
Okay.
get a
No,
little
no,
more
I was just
information
curious.
for
I
you.
was curious. And I don't even know that people care to know, like as long as they
Mhm.
know that their scenarios are running and they have some way to confirm that they're running, you could
Mhm.
see the end results after the script runs that it created sales orders, it created shipments. I'm good, right? As long as I know it happened and it happened at a substantially less cost than if I had someone work on it manually and spend 6 hours processing that
Mhm.
data. I think it makes sense. So yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I will be doing I'll be doing a webinar where we go through kind of Sprintera's upgrade tools. One of them is going to be the system integrity testing. So um, we'll show kind of what the interface of this testing area looks like, what the end result looks like as far as the report compared to the errors that we're seeing in Acumatica, the errors that we're not seeing in Acumatica, and all of that. So I'll be able to go in a little more detail. It'll be, I think it might be November 19th, but I'll get the exact date. But in November, we're going to do a deeper dive into each of those, both the customization tool, assessment tool, the integrity testing, and then also the portal that we use that kind of has up to date statuses on all facets of the upgrade.
I will get that link from you and drop it on the episode page at augforums.com/episode 158.
Okay.
I'm also curious, do you have anything, on your website that just talks about the tool in general, or maybe the webinar is the best place to get more info on that?
Yeah, we do have a couple of articles out there. We have a blog area of the website where we go through some of this stuff. So I can share those links as well. There's one for the customization tool, there's another one for the integrity testing, and there's a third one for our portal that clients use to stay abreast with what we're doing on their upgrades. So yeah, I can post those links as well.
Cool. Awesome. Love it. We still do have some time here. You want to talk modern UI in general, like how that's going to impact all this? I guess
Yeah.
my only take in general on modern UI is this is way more than a modern UI. This is a complete rewrite of the Acumatica application that has taken over 6 years. To me, you could give it a totally new product. And if you were a company like Sage or Microsoft, you would do that because they love renaming stuff. But we could give this a completely new name, Acumatica 2.0, whatever. I mean, in my opinion, it's a brand new product because they recoded it in .NET Core. Supposedly, it'll be able to run on Linux. Once it's fully there, they need to phase out the old stuff first. But 25 R2 is a huge release from the standpoint of this 6-year plus project is finally officially arrived. And I think it's probably going to take another year or so to completely shut down the .NET code and make it fully .NET Core compliant. But this is a big deal. And even if you look at the release notes themselves, just the number of pages is higher than any of the release notes in the last 5 years, at least. So it's a big deal. But to me, what that means is setting expectations here. I'm expecting upgrades to be more bumpy, shifting into this new modern application. Are you in alignment with that, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. So kind of the price you pay for all of this shiny new stuff is in order to transition to be able to take full advantage of the shiny new stuff. There's a bit of a process. Like you said, it's a complete shift in the framework of Acumatica. So going from, on a I think we're on ASPX, we're going to TypeScript and we're going to HTML, and everything's going to need to be rewritten. So for customizations, for example, they're going to need to be rewritten in the new framework. And the beauty of it is there's all kinds of benefit out of it. There's the list of things that are coming with 25 R2.
It'll be worth the pain. Yeah, agreed.
But in addition to just what people are seeing as far as there's this list of 50 new wonderful things in 25 R2. The flexibility that we're going to have going forward is also a huge win out of this, because now going forward, Acumatica is going to have all kinds of ability to do things that in the past we couldn't have done on the framework that we were on. But yeah, as far as upgrades on a very focused basis, there is going to be a significantly increased level of effort for an upgrade going from a 25R1 to a 25R2, for example, because you're going to have to do kind of the standard back-end components of transitioning a customization package, but you're also going to have to convert it to the new coding language. So Acumatica has a tool on this, which is taking some of the legwork from it, and it works to varying degrees with varying levels of complexity with your customizations. But there's still going to be definitely an increased level of effort to convert over. The good thing is it's a one-time transition. Once you're transitioned, you're not going to have to go through that process again, other than more standard upgrade things. And with the way that they're shifting upgrades, I would anticipate going forward, upgrades may become kind of smoother and smoother as we go. But yeah, getting to 25R2, or whenever you decide to make the jump, whether you're waiting to go to 26R1, getting to the modern UI, we've seen different results, and part of it's going to depend on how quickly Acumatica is able to continue to develop their conversion tool, because Right now, it works well on some customizations and some screens, and then other screens, there's still a pretty big manual effort. So how quickly they continue to develop that will be the big variable here. But we're seeing anywhere from, you know, double the level of effort to, in some cases with very complex packages, it's, 6 or 7 times the level of effort for this standalone upgrade. But it all depends. It's pretty variable depending upon what customizations you have, and are you going now, or are you going in 7 months once more of it can be automated? Because that's something we're working on as well. Is automation's a huge thing, obviously, and as we continue to have firsthand experience with moving to modern UI, we're going to be able to gain some efficiencies. We'll be able to automate some portions of the process. Acumatica is going to be able to continue to automate portions of the process. So it's just such a huge variable right now. But I think the general rule is to expect it's going to take more hours and more dollars than a typical upgrade, but it's going to be worth it. And then once you get there, you should kind of anticipate that upgrades start to smooth out a little bit over the next few years.
Makes sense. Love it. Yeah. And to me, it's just all about setting expectations. Hey, probably going to be bumpy. Look, if you have no customizations, maybe it's completely smooth, but I'd rather err on the side of, setting some, it might be bumpy expectations. And even your comments, it could be twice as much cost, even 6 to 7 on more complex stuff. It's just good to know that up front going into it, so you're not surprised by it. But I'm totally with you. It's worth the price because you're moving to all sorts of technical geeky reasons why this will be really cool and great going forward. It'll be worth the price of going to that. But I don't know. Do you think it really could be called something else? Like, instead of Acumatica, we could rename the whole thing, because in reality, it's that big of a change. In my opinion, what do you think?
It kind of reminds me of like Sage. You're talking about legacy Sage versus now cloud Sage, and you have Sage has a million different products. Microsoft has a million different products, and you could almost look at this as we have an Acumatica Classic and we have an Acumatica Modern, and they're so different that it's almost as different as the legacy versus the cloud transition that these other vendors have made. Acumatica, originating in the cloud, has never had that shift, but to me, this is their equivalent of that shift, is going now to the modern UI. So
great way of putting it. Yeah, I like that. I like that. So modern UI implications are big, but worth it. We talked about the tools that you guys have developed. It sounds like you pretty much exclusively work with VARs on the back end to assist with upgrades. What if I am a customer and I'm like, hey, Garrett sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and I've had nightmare upgrades in the past. Can we work together? Like, how does that work for someone who reaches out to you directly?
Yeah, so typically what we'll do is we'll coordinate with the client and the VAR the best way to approach it. We do have clients and VARs where they've said, hey, it makes the most sense for you to work directly with the client, and in those cases we have no problem doing that. So if there are any clients out there that have had issues with upgrades in the past, what we can have a conversation, kind of figure out what's going on, and then we can coordinate with the VAR the best way to approach it. And even if it's something we're going forward, we manage upgrades, we're happy to do that. But again, we're typically going to coordinate that with the VAR, just because VARs tend to be our primary point of contact, and we want to make sure that everything is above board. So we have those conversations up front. It's all, like you said, expectation setting. So if it's understood and everything's above board that we're going to be working directly with the client, we have no problem doing that. And we have, there's quite a few instances where clients and VARs have just decided, like, listen, based on the project that we have and based off of the resources that are available on the VAR side and the expectations from the client, it just makes sense in some cases for us to have a direct relationship with the client. And so in those scenarios, that's something that we're comfortable doing. So yeah, clients or VARs who may have questions about this or may want to consider working together in the future, you can reach out to us directly at Sprintera, and then we'll figure out kind of the lay of the land and then the best path forward.
Love it. Would you be okay if I put your email address on the episode page as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I will do. I'll do that right after we finish broadcasting here, but I'll put it on the augforums.com/episode 158 page. But it sounds like, no matter who reaches out to you, you do always loop in the VAR, and I think that's the right way to do that. We do the same thing at Trailed. If Acumatica customer reaches out to Trailed, hey, I've heard great things, and we want to implement Trailed, we always loop in the VAR, and respect the VAR as well. And so I think that's the right way to do it. That's good.
Yep.
Awesome. Any other thoughts that you have before we wrap it up here?
No, just as we're making the shift to modern UI, and as we're expanding our upgrade program, there's so much growth that's happening right now. So I would just say, as a general note, if anyone ever wants to have a conversation about it, even if it's less about, hey, can we use your services, and more just about, here's what we've seen, and then comparing notes, that type of a deal. There's going to be a lot of learning that happens over the next 6 months, the next 12 months, and kind of going forward as we all make this transition. So I'm definitely open, if anyone ever wants to have a conversation, whether it's to share notes or whatever the case may be. I'm always open to that conversation, and very appreciative to you, Tim, for the opportunity and for having this conversation. It really good conversation, and I have a ton of respect for you, so appreciate the opportunity, and hope to be able to kind of continue that in the future with other members of the community as well. These type of conversations are very important, and me personally continuing to grow, but also as a community, we tend to be pretty collaborative, and I just want to be a part of those conversations as we continue to figure out how everyone's going to utilize modern UI best going forward.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great point. I mean, this is something that I have put a good amount of thought into over the years, in varying amounts of intensity at different times. But like what on this topic specifically, modern UI, it sounds like you're not just talking about upgrade challenges here. You're talking about like what's really the best way to leverage the new stuff. Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I'm just curious, pick your brain, your thoughts on this. Like when I started augforums.com, I started off by blogging. That was just my way of taking notes as I was learning Acumatica. And I learned, well, my takeaway, I should say, from that is that blogging is a great medium for when you're blazing a trail into a new area and you don't know what you're doing. I think that was a good medium for that. After a while, I kind of got bored doing that because it was very lonely. And so then I switched to a forum format where, all right, now I can submit stuff, but other people can submit stuff also that I never would have thought of. Oh, there's an issue that I haven't run into yet. Let's take a look at it, and we can collaborate on a forum post. Now you've got community.acumatica.com, which I think is a better place to go to for forum stuff. And one reason why I've shifted more to this podcast format. But as we were talking before we went live, like to me, it's not about producing the 1 hour episode, because I don't think there's many people out there who are going to listen to an entire episode. I just don't think we human beings have that attention span anymore. But to me, it's all about the clips that I can generate off the back end of this. And I've got a project I'm working on to do that. But that's another medium, right? And so like another format, though, that I've really wanted to experiment with is more of a roundtable format. And it would still be on the podcast because that's my focus these days. But instead of 2 squares on the screen, we'd have maybe 4 to 6 squares on the screen, and just kind of compare notes in real time. Just different ways to do it. And I don't think there's any one right way. I think it's a combination of the ways, right? If you can write a blog post on stuff you learn, great. It takes a lot of time to write a blog post, though. So if you have just less time, you could do a forum post, and that's easier for people to browse through. But we could also do another thing like this where we do a roundtable and just kind of have the key is, how do we find the people who, the people to have on? I don't know, but those are just some of my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on other mediums, other ways that we can collaborate as a community?
Yeah, well, first, I do just want to say I think the roundtable idea is a really, really good idea, because ultimately we can read all the articles that we want, but typically the point of an article is one, to convey information, but also it's to provoke thought. And so if you're reading an article and you have I'm reading this and it brings up these two questions, I mean, you have nowhere to go with that other than to maybe search for another article that fills in those gaps. So the beauty of a roundtable is you're having that conversation, that information is being shared, and then you have a immediate reaction to that information. Now you're asking the question, and kind of as a group of people who would have some expertise in the area, you're able to kind of talk through that concept. It reminds me, so I did a session at Summit last Summit. It wasn't a roundtable, but it was two people. It was actually Haley, who was in the chat here from iTech. She and I did a session together on support best practices, and that was very beneficial to me because there was the whole concept of preparation. So we prepared together. We kind of talked through different ideas, and I was able to learn from her some of what they're doing over there, share some ideas about what I was doing, and expanding that from 2 to 4 or 6, I think, is incredibly valuable because you're just multiplying the effectiveness of the conversation by bringing in more folks who have expertise and background in the area. So I think, to me, I think transitioning this into some sort of a roundtable, and whether it may not need to be every podcast, but having that as like a monthly or a quarterly or however often you wanted to do that, I think that would bring a ton of value. And to me, that's just about the best way to that's the best next step. Like, the forums are still very valuable because it allows people to interact and respond on their own time. But having a dedicated time where you're saying, hey, we're going to talk about these type of topics, we're going to see where the conversation goes, unscripted, the same way that this podcast is, I think that really opens the door for us to learn kind of as quickly and aggressively as possible in those set guidelines. So to me, that's a really good next step.
Cool. No, I'm glad you're enthusiastic about that. It makes me now more enthusiastic about it because I haven't done one yet, but I've been wanting to do one. And this would be a good topic for it. The one that I've talked with a customer about doing it on is specifically distribution customers, because it's a customer that running on distribution just wants to talk to other distribution customers. You got to come up with something to talk about though ahead of time. It's a little bit more work than just a off the cuff one like we're doing here, but I like that you're enthusiastic about it. And as soon as you mentioned Haley's name again, it then caused me to realize I should have also mentioned AcuConnect, acu-connect.com, especially with they do several things, but for me, especially with the annual virtual conference that they've been doing, there's always a trade-off with like the unscripted conversation like we're doing. It's easier to produce it, but it's like, not as it's not as meaty, it's not as dense as a nice solid presentation, but then those take more work to put together. AcuConnect is doing this in the fall every year, and they get a lot of people to present something solid, and Haley is one of those presenters. I think you might have presented something as well at the last one. And that's another good venue for. So yeah, it's not one. There's pros and cons to all these different mediums, but I'm always like, what tool do I reach for in this situation? When I need to learn more about something.
Well, it's like the conversation we were having before the call about marketing, where it's kind of this amoeba of like trying this and the 50% of marketing spend being wasted, but who knows which 50% it is. Like, it's a similar concept here where it all kind of comes together to form the perfect, pie or final puzzle of sharing information. And I think each medium definitely has its place, but there's a million topics out there that we could have these on it, whether it's, how are we, people that are selling Acumatica well, how are you doing it? People that are having success in field service because there have been, some issues there. How are you doing it? Like, there's a million different angles you could approach it from. And there are, all kinds of different people in Acumatica that are really well versed and having a lot of success with any one thing that you choose. And then getting some of those people together in a room, I think there's a lot of value that could come out of it. But yeah, it's a piece of the broader puzzle of kind of continuing to improve the Acumatica product and community. And yeah, the roundtables would be another piece, same way this podcast and the forums and all of those things are as well.
Love it. Oh, glad this came up. Yeah, I mean, the good thing is technically it's super simple. Like we just have more squares on the screen. The puzzle and the challenge is finding who those squares are for that particular topic. That's the challenge. But
Yeah.
no, I'm more motivated to put some effort into that challenge. Thank you. Glad you like that idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
Of course.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the upgrade chat. I think we presented a very real approach to it. Cut down some of the maybe unrealistic expectations that might have been set for some customers. But yeah, I mean, why are you paying for SaaS software if you're not taking advantage of the upgrades? And even with Acumatica, you're not going to be supported unless you're on a pretty regular upgrade cadence. It's pretty aggressive. I think you got to be upgrading. Actually, that's a question I hadn't asked you yet. In general, what I see is you got to be upgrading like once a year because there's time it takes to do the upgrade. And so by the time you're upgraded, you're really close to being unsupported. Is that a decent cadence that you see in general, about once a year?
Yeah, I think the most realistic cadence tends to be once a year. There is kind of a push from Acumatica to have people on 2 times a year, always current. But with the level of effort that needs to go into an upgrade for it to go well from both the client side and the VAR side and services partner side, doing it twice a year tends to be a bit much for a lot of clients. It can happen, and again, if you got less customizations, your Acumatica setup is a little more simple. I don't think 2 times a year is too terrible, but in general, the most realistic and most sustainable way that I've seen is doing it once a year, dedicating the effort and the people to make sure that it goes well. And then, yeah, but Acumatics have been shrinking the timeline, and we're down to where 24R1 is just about to be retired, and it seems like we just got on 24R1, but
Right.
it moves so
Especially
quickly.
with the whole service pack thing and being like shy to going into that world. Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it
I'm
is
with you
funny
now.
though.
Yeah, once a year is about right, at least currently. And that's why I put that always current phrase on the
Yeah.
episode description, because I wanted to take a shot at that. I think for most, I don't know, if you're kind of towards the QuickBooks level of the spectrum, maybe that's fine, no customizations, etc. But I don't know. To me, the sweet spot of Acumatica is not those smaller companies; it's the larger companies, and I think more than once a year is too painful. I'm totally with you on that. I like that. So if you land in that once a year cadence, then to me the logical thing is, all right, let's pick a path and a line on either R1s or R2s. Now I know historically R1s were more of like the little more platform features, and then R2s were a little more of like industry edition features. I haven't really checked up on that lately. Have you picked up on if it's still that way? Because what's funny is it's not an R1 that where the new UI totally dropped. It was an R2. So to me, that kind of blew up that trend. But what are your thoughts on the R1s versus the R2s? Doesn't matter. You just pick one and stick with it.
I feel like I feel like there's less of a distinction with the R1s and the R2s being dedicated to certain things anymore. And yeah, I think modern UI coming in 25R2 is a good indication of that. Typically, for whatever reason, I've kind of gravitated towards R2s as being a recommendation, with the thought being initially that a lot of the big stuff feature wise is coming in R1, and a lot of it, whatever kinks there may be, could be worked out by R2.
That's
but
how
now
I used to think also. That's how I used to think. Yeah.
I don't know that that's the rule anymore. So I may shift that thinking. But
because
that's been
with 2025 R2, right? To me, that's what blew it up. Yeah. This is more like an R1. Yes.
Yeah. So that's another thing where like I'd love to have conversations with other people who may have shared the same thought or may have had different thoughts, but because we're now, we're reacting and adjusting, and there's not really any direct Acumatica, verbiage or releases out there saying, hey, we're making this shift. So a lot of times it's just speculation, and it's what we're seeing on the ground. So those are the conversations I'm very interested in, is to kind of compare notes on that. But yeah, it's always been R2s for me once a year. That's that could shift going forward, because now with modern UI being on an R2, there are some folks that are like, well, let's give it a little bit of time to marinate, make sure it's good, and then make the shift. But um, we'll see. We'll see. Even the once a year cadence with Acumatica shrinking the retirement timeline now, if you're going once a year, you still kind of feel that retirement deadline nipping at your
Yeah.
heels right before
Yeah.
you do your next upgrade. So
Totally.
that's part of the incentive, I think, to move people to twice a year. But once a year still certainly sustainable, and you can make it happen.
Yeah, and so I think where I'm at on the R1s versus R2s, I used to be more of an R2 person as well, for the same reason. Like, R1s are a little more core stuff, and I want to let that settle, and R2s are more stable. But
Mhm.
I'm thinking the same way these days. Like, it doesn't really matter. And then when I step back and think about it, take my geek hat off for a minute and try to think real world. Like, really,
Yeah.
what matters more is resources. Like, what time of year is less busy for you? Is it
Mhm.
fall heading into the end of the year, which now you hit the holidays? That's a challenge with R2. I mean, because R2 just came out, and you don't want to be on that first version anyways. So you're getting into like latter part of October, November, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. That's a challenge with R2. And it depends on the business. Where's your busy time of year? And then
Yeah.
also resources on the VAR side. If everyone's doing R2s, the VAR is going to be slammed at that time of year, and you might need to. So I think those two considerations are also big factors. I think the important thing is pick one and stick with that on an annual basis, and find a time of year that's good for you, your company,
Mhm.
the VAR, or whoever you're working with to help you through those upgrades, and just keep humming along with that once a year cadence. And we'll all keep our fingers crossed that we're not forced to do it more frequently than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that will start to become the number one deciding factor, is just, what does the cycle of their business look like, and when are they going to have the people to do it? And then, but yeah, that R2 has always been tough, because it's like, well, by the time we get into it, it'll be Thanksgiving, and then it'll be Christmas, and then it'll be New Year. So a lot of times we ended up just saying, all right, January 2nd, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to have a sandbox in place. We're going to do all that stuff. But at that point, by the time you're upgraded, the next release is almost out. And that's why
Yeah.
we a lot of times would end up having, feeling like that expiration was right around the corner, because once you back it up 4 or 5 months, you're all of a sudden near the end of the cycle. So it's, yeah, it might be changing, and I might become an R1 person, and then it'll be a lot easier to start that process more quickly, because you're not fighting the holiday season.
Yeah, and you come right on the back of the summit. So if you've seen those demos, you're more like emotionally motivated to get on to the shiny new stuff that you just saw, right?
Yeah, from
Yeah.
the client's perspective, especially if you're a VAR who tends to have good client involvement at the summit, then it's like, all right, the client's coming away from summit, they're pumped up, they're ready. Like, oh,
Yeah.
you want to upgrade to the new version? Absolutely, let's do it. Whereas you get to fall, and they've already forgotten about the last summit, and they're just trying to get to year end, so it becomes a different conversation.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind just one release a year, one major release a year, just because it is so hard to take. But yeah, Acumatica, if you're listening, which I don't expect anyone to be listening an hour and 20 minutes into this episode, but I'll just put it out there that, yeah, that might. I heard that Odoo does that. I've been learning a little more about Odoo recently. They have. I still, for business reasons, like Acumatica better, but I think they do one major release a year. And then the challenge there, though, is that the features that drop, it's so massive. Instead of a 300-page release notes document with Acumatica, let's just imagine it as 600-page release notes. It's a lot to digest. So there's pros and cons, right? But yeah,
Mhm.
in theory, like if everyone went to Summit and then everyone turns around and implements that new version, that is kind of a cool, and that's the way, as I understand it, at least the way Odoo does it. And I think it's an interesting
Yeah.
approach, but pros and cons
Yeah.
for sure. Well, thanks, man. Thanks again for taking the time. And yeah, love to circle back with a roundtable format on the new UI as well at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity.
We'll catch you later.
All right. Thanks. Take care, Tim. Bye.